Welcome to Neighbor to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Corum. I'm your host today, and today my guest is Art Greenbaum.
Hi, Lynn. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for coming, Art. And you've been on the show before where you were telling people about the offerings at Sportsman's and the facility and so forth with Dan Rosenkowski.
Right.
And but we're going to have you back this time as to tell us a little bit about yourself more, just focus on that and what brought you to Brattleboro and things like that.
Well,
So tell us about yourself.
well, my wife and I, Susan, used to ski here in the mid-'60s, and when I finished my apprenticeship and my associate's degree, we elected to move to Brattleboro to raise our family. We have two daughters. They live in the northern part of the state, a couple grandkids. We moved to Brattleboro primarily because of the easy access to 91 to get to the cities, to see our family. And we felt that Brattleboro was a good jump-off point in southern Vermont to become Vermonters and live technically the dream of being in New England.
Uh-huh. And what town, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was basically raised on Long Island. My wife was raised in Southern California. We met in high school. She was a junior, I was a sophomore.
You met her family had moved to New York?
That is correct, yeah. We met in high school, we dated. After high school, we married shortly thereafter, and then had our first daughter, Corey, who was born at Bayshore Hospital in 1971. Then moved to Vermont shortly thereafter, and then had our second daughter, Carrie, who was born here at BMH.
Mm-hmm. So there is a dream to want to be in Vermont. That was part of the mystique?
Oh, I think absolutely. When you look at New England and then you actually look at Vermont, I think that there's this dream that a lot of us share, that it's a way of life that is more rewarding other than financial gain.
Uh-huh. But you've had good financial success in Brattleboro. And so let's talk about how, when you came here, did we have two nickels to rub together? Because most of us came and didn't.
No, I don't think I had two nickels to rub together. In fact, when we came here, we moved to Brattleboro in September of '71. I rented a house here in town. Actually, it was across the street from where we live presently still, living in Hillwinds for the last almost 40 years this September. We had all our possessions packed in about a 15-foot moving van and a pickup truck and a trailer, and we moved up. We rented a house while I built the house that we live in now, and completed that in the middle of January, and then said to my wife, okay, I'm going out to find a job. I left that morning about 5 a.m., called her about 7:30 p.m. and said I found a job. I'm working for a company out of Connecticut, and I'll be working in construction in Smith College, and then from there it went to Greenfield Community College. Then from there it went to Putnam Memorial Hospital, which is in Bennington, which is a new version of the same location. That lasted for about 2.5 to 3 years, and then the Arab oil embargoes came, and we were paying, gas rationing was happening, and there was a recession that was being forecasted. We were coming off of the war economy, and I turned around and, at the advice of my close worker, who was my boss also, he said, I can get you on in Boston if you want. So for almost 2 years I commuted daily from Brattleboro to Boston, worked on the Shawmut building, which was a 40-story high-rise for the company that I was working for in Connecticut. So I was in Boston for about 2 years, and then that project wound down in late November of '74. Turned around and we decided to take a vacation, so we took a couple weeks off, and just as I was leaving to go on vacation, I received a phone call and said I could get a job in Connecticut again. So my wife said, let's go on vacation. So we went on vacation and I came back, and then my old boss called me up and said, hey, I got good news for you. Now this is during the recession of 1975. He said, I got good news for you. I can put you back to work in either Syracuse or Utica. Do you want to take it?
Is that good news?
Well, it was a job, so it was
Yeah.
considered good news.
Uh-huh.
And I said, let me just think about it. And Sue said, no way. We didn't move to Vermont for you to commute for a job in upstate New York. We either make a living here or we move. And with that, I said, okay, so I guess we're going to have to make a living here some way. So in 1975, in spring of 1975, we started GPI Construction and struggled to keep things going.
What does the GPI stand for?
Well, the reality of it was, when I first started the business with Susan, we had a partner. His name was Paganelli. So it was Greenbaum and Paganelli Interior Construction, because we were going to focus on commercial construction. About 3 months after forming the actual legal business, Gary said to me he didn't want to move to Vermont because he was also unemployed in Connecticut, thinking about the dream of moving to Vermont. He elected to bail out because his wife didn't want to live in the boonies, and we lived 3 miles away from town at that time, and that was considered like, why do you live so far out of town? We decided to split, so we kept the name because it was
Why
a
change
little,
all the
why
paperwork?
change all the paperwork?
Yeah.
Turned around, and years later, my attorney at that time was Doug Wilson, said, well, let's figure it out, and he came up with the name Greenbaum's Property Improvement Construction Company. So that's where the GPI came from an initial dream that kind of split, and that partner went their way, and we elected to stay in the business for about an additional 26 years, and then we incorporated another partner in the business today who's president of the company, Joe Fortier and Alyssa Fortier. They're equal partners in our construction business and in our real estate too.
Well, I've always wondered what that is.
A lot of people do. Now that's the secret's out.
That secret's
Yeah.
out. We got that cleared up. So let's go back a little bit. I don't know about you and Sue, but when Jesse and I started, we each had, I think we each had $1,000 to our name because we had worked that summer, and you could make about $1,000 in a summer. You lived with your parents, and so you had no expenses, and you just banked everything you made. And that's about what we had when we started, $2,000 when we got married.
All right.
Yeah, that one worked.
Yeah, it worked.
And we never considered ourselves poor. I never even thought about that I was poor. But yet, by standards, we were.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet today, when you don't have a certain income, and even though you're just starting out and you're really not worth paying too much to because you don't have any skills, people say, well, you deserve more. There seems to be this environment that we live in that, you need, you can't be poor. We have to subsidize you until you get there. If you ever get that thinking of that's what's going on?
Oh, I think it's absolutely what's going on. I remember it was in about 1954. My dad had started his own law business, and I remember hearing conversations about money. Don't remember a lot about it, but I also remember very distinctively having rationed powder milk that my dad would pick up someplace in the city, and I assume it was from, the Army Surplus Agency, and he would pick up powdered milk that my mom would take whole milk and mix with water so we could stretch the milk out. I remember getting huge blocks of American cheese, orange cheese.
Mm-hmm.
We had canned hams, and they were all in the drab olive green can.
So is this all government?
That was
food?
just
the
government
food?
food. No, this was, we had rations, you might say, of government food to help subsidize us, and I would assume my dad probably, because he didn't have the income and he needed some food to help us, could get whatever was available that particular time. There wasn't food stamps, there was none around that I knew of, and it was just here it is, here's some extra cheese from the government, so we ate grilled cheese sandwiches and had lots of macaroni and cheese. You know, when you talk about starting out, I remember Susan and I, we started out and we didn't think of ourselves as poor in any way because we had jobs and we just didn't think of ourselves as having much income. It wasn't anything else other than you didn't have much income. And
But
as
you also knew that you just couldn't buy much, but you know, you basically met your bills.
you met your bills because if you didn't, you were really in deep trouble.
Yeah.
And you met your bills and you did what it took to make ends meet. And I know as we moved to Vermont, my dad made the comment, he says, are you actually crazy? He says, number one, you're moving there, you don't have a job. I was a union carpenter carrying a full journeyman's book in New York City, and I left in 1970-ish, earning about $7 or $8 an hour as a journeyman.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good then.
That was pretty good in 1970. Mm-hmm. And I moved to New England where the rate was almost in half. In fact, it was about $3.60 an hour. And you worked a 40-hour week where I was making about $7 an hour in New York, working a 35-hour week. But you did what it took to make a living. There were really no major construction company projects or jobs in the area, so I took the best that I could and took that first job at Smith College. To me, you just did what you had to do. I can't tell you how many times we didn't have what I'd consider really good food in the house. There were a lot of meals that were franks and beans and a lot of tuna casseroles, and we were usually almost dead broke when maybe you had a little windfall. I can remember one windfall that I did have, and we were dead broke at the time. As an apprentice in New York, we had to drive sometimes as much as an hour and a half to the job. And I was a scrounger, so every day at the end of the day I would actually pick up copper wire and throw it in a paper bag and bring it home. And I had accumulated probably the equivalent of about 100 pounds of copper wire. And we moved it up here. Mm-hmm. And we had started the business and things were really, really tight. And one day Sue said to me, you know, well, what can we do? Well, we got that copper wire, and I think I remember getting about $20, which was in 1975 a lot of money. And we took the copper wire, and I cashed it in at that time to Brattleboro Salvage, which is now where Triple T is, when Benny owned it before Norm and Mary bought it. And, you know, you did what it took, and I had accumulated 100 pounds of junk copper wire. Boy, I was really happy I found that copper wire in the basement and cashed it in for what we got, because it put a lot of meals on the table for that period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how those things, it works out. And there are a lot of people today who are struggling.
Absolutely.
And are working really hard to make ends meet.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And
including, I think the majority of people that I know are working a lot harder today for less than they did 10 years ago, and I think there's been some statistics that have proven that too, based on, you know, the survey of incomes in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, well, just the inflationary, I mean, inflation supposedly is not a big deal right now, but they're not counting fuel and food in those figures.
Right. Yeah.
Which, to me, those are the two biggest.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know that inflation has hit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And when the dollar gets inflated and you're still making the same amount
that you were making in 2007 or 2005,
yeah.
or some people even less than what they were making in 2000. It's hard. Yeah.
Well, you're making the same dollar amount, but things cost
a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's as long as you can have that job, you're okay. But so let's talk. One of the things we're going to talk about is what is a businessman when you see these things revolving around you. How do you evaluate all this stuff? What do you